My mother-in-law wore white to my wedding, so I gave her a toast that turned her face the same shade as my dress. Vivian had made it clear from day one that I wasn't good enough for her precious son. When Kieran proposed, she actually laughed. "You're serious about this girl?" she asked, looking me up and down like I was something stuck to her shoe. The morning of our wedding, she showed up in a flowing white gown with a sweetheart neckline and a train. Not ivory, not cream, pure, bridal white. She posed for photos like she was the bride, even suggesting the photographer capture her special moment. My sister pulled me aside, furious. "Are you going to let her get away with this?" I smiled calmly. "Don't worry, I've got this handled." During the reception, I stood to give my speech. Everyone expected the usual sentimental thank yous. Instead, I raised my champagne flute and looked directly at Vivian. "I want to thank my new mother-in-law for wearing white today," I began, my voice carrying across the silent room. "It's so fitting considering how pure and innocent she wants everyone to think she is." Vivian's face shifted from smug satisfaction to confusion. "Vivian, your white dress reminded me of something beautiful. Fresh snow, clean, untouched. Unlike your browser history, which I accidentally discovered last week when you asked me to check your email." The color drained from her face. "Should I tell everyone about your hobby, Vivian? Or should I save that conversation for when Kieran's father gets back from his business trip?" She was gripping her champagne glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. "Actually," I continued sweetly, "maybe we should discuss how you've been spending your Tuesday afternoons. I have photos." Vivian shot to her feet, knocking over her chair. "You little..." "Careful," I interrupted. "We're at a family gathering, with children present." She stormed out, white dress billowing behind her like a surrender flag. Kieran squeezed my hand. "What photos?" he whispered. I winked. "Trust me, you don't want to know." 3 days later, Kieran's father filed for divorce. But that wasn't the end of Vivian's revenge. That night, I found something slipped under our hotel door that made my blood run cold. The envelope was thick, cream-colored paper with my name written in Vivian's distinctive handwriting. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Kieran still in the shower, humming our first dance song. Inside were copies of bank statements, medical records, and what looked like legal documents. But it was the handwritten note on top that made my stomach drop. "Congratulations on your little performance, darling. Too bad you won't be enjoying married life for long. Check the dates on these documents carefully. Your precious husband has been keeping secrets too." V. The first document was a bank statement from an account I'd never seen before. Kieran's name was on it, along with regular deposits of $5,000 every month for the past 2 years. The memo line read, "Consulting fees." But the account it came from belonged to someone named Delilah Thornton. My heart pounded as I flipped to the next page. Medical records from a fertility clinic. Kieran's name. Delilah Thornton's name. Dated 6 months ago. The shower stopped running. I shoved the papers back into the envelope just as Kieran emerged from the bathroom, towel wrapped around his waist, still grinning like a man who'd just married the love of his life. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing my expression. "Perfect," I managed to say, my voice surprisingly steady. "Just wedding cards from the front desk." That night, I lay awake next to my new husband, studying his sleeping face in the moonlight streaming through the hotel windows. The man I'd married, the man I'd defended against his mother's accusations, had been living a double life. While I'd been planning our wedding, he'd been making regular deposits from another woman. While I'd been choosing flowers and cake flavors, he'd been visiting fertility clinics. The next morning, I waited until Kieran left for his morning run, a habit that had always annoyed me, but now seemed like divine intervention. I pulled out my laptop and began investigating Delilah Thornton. What I found made everything worse. Delilah wasn't just any woman. She was Kieran's ex-girlfriend from college, the one he'd claimed meant nothing to him, the one he said had moved to another state and was completely out of his life. According to her social media profiles, she lived 20 minutes from our apartment and worked as a pediatric nurse at the same hospital where Kieran did his residency. Her Instagram was public, and as I scrolled through her photos, my heart shattered a little more with each image. There was Kieran at her birthday party last year, his arm around her waist. Kieran at what looked like a couple's weekend retreat, feeding her strawberries on a beach. Most damning of all, a photo from 3 weeks before our wedding showing Kieran's hand on her very pregnant belly, with the caption, "Can't wait to meet our little miracle." Our little miracle. I screenshot everything before she could make her account private. Then I dug deeper. The consulting fees weren't for any legitimate business. They were child support payments. Kieran had been paying Delilah $5,000 a month since she got pregnant. The fertility clinic visits weren't recent either. They went back over a year. They'd been trying to have a baby together while he was engaged to me. When Kieran returned from his run, I was sitting at the hotel room's small table, the envelope spread out in front of me like evidence at a crime scene. "What's all this?" he asked, still catching his breath. "Your mother left us a wedding gift," I said calmly. His face went white as he recognized the documents. "Listen, I can explain." "Can you?" I interrupted. "Because I'd love to hear how you explain paying child support to your pregnant ex-girlfriend while planning our wedding." He sat down heavily on the bed, head in his hands. "It's not what you think." "Really?" "Because I think you've been lying to me for over a year. I think you got another woman pregnant while we were engaged. I think you've been supporting her financially while letting me plan our future together. The baby isn't mine," he said desperately. I pulled out my phone and showed him Delilah's Instagram photo. "That's funny because she seems to think otherwise. She's confused, emotional. She was seeing multiple people." "Stop." My voice was ice cold. "Just stop lying. I've seen enough." The truth came out in pieces, like pulling shards of glass from a wound. Yes, he'd been seeing Delilah while we were engaged. Yes, the baby was his. Yes, he'd been planning to continue supporting them both after our marriage. He claimed he loved me, that Delilah was just a mistake, that he'd been trying to figure out how to tell me. You had a year to figure it out, I said. Instead, you stood at an altar yesterday and promised to forsake all others. I was going to tell you after the honeymoon, he said weakly. Tell me what exactly? That you have a secret family? That our entire relationship is built on lies? He tried to touch my hand, but I pulled away. I love you. We can work through this. No, I said simply. We can't. I started packing my suitcase while he pleaded behind me. He promised to cut contact with Delilah. He swore the baby wouldn't interfere with our marriage. He even offered to sign a prenup giving me everything if he ever cheated again. You don't understand, I said, folding my wedding dress carefully into tissue paper. This isn't about the cheating. This isn't about the baby. This is about the fact that you're a fundamentally dishonest person who was willing to build our entire marriage on a lie. One mistake doesn't define who I am, he argued. This wasn't one mistake. This was hundreds of decisions over more than a year. Every day you chose to lie to me. Every night you came home and kissed me knowing you'd been with someone else. Every time I talked about our future children, you already had one on the way. I zipped up my suitcase and headed for the door. Where are you going? He asked desperately. To see a lawyer, I said. Our marriage lasted exactly 18 hours. I'm pretty sure that's some kind of record. The hotel lobby was buzzing with late checkout activity, families heading home from weekend vacations, business travelers preparing for Monday meetings, normal people living normal lives while mine imploded around me. I called my sister from the parking lot. How's married life? She asked cheerfully. Over, I said simply. The silence stretched between us before she said, I'll pick you up in an hour. Actually, I need you to do something else first. Remember that private investigator you used during your divorce? I need his number. Done. What do you need him to find? Everything, I said. I want to know exactly how deep this goes. 3 hours later, I was sitting in a coffee shop across from Detective Raymond Walsh, a weathered man in his 50s who specialized in marital investigations. He'd already reviewed the documents Vivian had provided, and the screenshots from Delilah's social media. This is pretty straightforward, he said. Your husband was maintaining a relationship with his ex-girlfriend throughout your engagement. The baby is definitely his. I can see the resemblance in the ultrasound photos she posted. The payment started when she hit 12 weeks, which suggests they knew about the pregnancy early on. What I don't understand is how Vivian got all this information, I said. Raymond smiled grimly. That's where it gets interesting. Your mother-in-law hired me 6 months ago. My coffee cup hit the table harder than I intended. What? She wanted dirt on you initially. Background check, financial records, anything that would prove you weren't suitable for her son. When I couldn't find anything significant, she asked me to investigate her son instead. She knew about Delilah this whole time? She's known about the affair for 6 months. She's known about the baby for 4 months. She even has photos of them together at the fertility clinic. I stared at him in disbelief. Why didn't she say anything? Because she was waiting for the right moment for maximum damage. She wanted your marriage to happen so she could destroy it immediately afterward. A divorce right after the wedding would be more humiliating than a broken engagement. She orchestrated this entire thing, down to wearing white at your wedding. She knew you'd retaliate, knew it would cause drama, knew you'd research her background for ammunition. She was counting on you finding those browser history records. Wait, what browser history? I made that up during my speech. Raymond chuckled. Your mother-in-law has a gambling addiction, online poker, sports betting, the works. She's lost over $200,000 in the past year. Her husband doesn't know, so she was terrified I actually had evidence of that? Exactly. She stormed out because she thought you'd discovered her secret, but her real plan was always to drop the bomb about Delilah after the wedding. I felt sick. She used me to destroy her own son's marriage. She destroyed your marriage to punish you for not being good enough, Raymond corrected. The fact that it also ruins her son is just collateral damage. Vivian Ashford is a woman who burns down entire houses to kill one spider. I hired Raymond to dig deeper. If Vivian wanted to play games, I'd make sure I understood all the rules. Over the next week, while I stayed with my sister and ignored Kieran's increasingly desperate calls, Raymond uncovered the full scope of Vivian's manipulation. She hadn't just known about Delilah, she'd been encouraging the relationship. Your mother-in-law has been paying Delilah's rent for the past 6 months. Raymond told me during our follow-up meeting. She's the one who suggested Delilah get pregnant. She even helped coordinate their schedule so they could meet while you were at work. She wanted him to cheat on me. She wanted you out of the picture entirely. But when it became clear Kieran wasn't going to leave you for Delilah, she decided to let you discover the affair after the wedding for maximum humiliation. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd thought possible. Not only had my husband been living a double life, but my mother-in-law had been orchestrating it from behind the scenes. There's more, Raymond said, sliding another folder across the table. Delilah doesn't know about Vivian's involvement. She thinks Kieran came back to her on his own. She has no idea she's been a pawn in someone else's game. I stared at the photos of Delilah, young, beautiful, radiant with pregnancy. She looked genuinely happy in every image, genuinely in love with Kieran. She had no idea she was being used. What about the gambling? I asked. Worse than I initially thought. She's into loan sharks now, the kind of people who break kneecaps when you don't pay. She owes $350,000 and has about 2 weeks before they start collecting collateral. An idea began forming in my mind. It was cruel, calculated, and exactly the kind of thing Vivian would do, which made it perfect. I need you to find out everything you can about Vivian's financial situation, I told Raymond. Bank accounts, credit cards, investments, insurance policies, everything. What are you planning? To give her exactly what she gave me, I said. A gift that keeps on giving. That evening, I finally answered one of Kieran's calls. Thank God, he said, relief flooding his voice. We need to talk. I can explain everything. You're right, I said calmly. We do need to talk. Meet me at Delilah's apartment tomorrow at 7. What? No, I don't want her involved in this. She's already involved, Kieran. She's carrying your child. Don't you think she deserves to know that you married someone else last week? The silence stretched between us. You told her? Not yet, but I will tomorrow night. With or without you there. Please don't do this. See you at 7, I said, and hung up. I spent the next day preparing. First, I visited a lawyer and started annulment proceedings. The marriage had been based on fraud. Kieran's deliberate concealment of his other relationship and child constituted grounds for annulment rather than divorce. Then I went shopping. If I was going to confront my husband's pregnant mistress, I was going to look absolutely perfect doing it. Finally, I made a call to Vivian. Enjoying your victory? I asked when she answered. I told you that you weren't good enough for my son, she said smugly. You're right. Kieran and I are getting an annulment. I'm meeting with Delilah tonight to work out custody arrangements. The silence on the other end was telling. This wasn't part of Vivian's plan. What custody arrangements? She asked carefully. Well, since Kieran and I are over, and he's going to be with Delilah now, I figure they'll need some financial help. Kieran doesn't make much as a resident. I was thinking of setting up a trust fund for the baby. That's generous of you. I can afford to be generous, especially since I'll be getting a significant settlement from the annulment. Fraud is expensive, Vivian. I could practically hear her calculating the implications. Besides, I continued, I'd hate for your grandchild to suffer because of adult drama. Family is so important, don't you think? After I hung up, I smiled for the first time in days. The trap was set. Delilah lived in a modest apartment complex about 20 minutes from the hospital. When I knocked on her door at exactly 7 o'clock, she answered wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater that couldn't quite hide her pregnant belly. Can I help you? She asked, confusion clear in her voice. I'm Kieran's wife, I said simply. We need to talk. Her face went white. His what? We got married last Saturday. But I think there's been some confusion about the timeline here, don't you? She sank onto her couch, one hand protectively over her stomach. He told me he broke up with you months ago. Well, that's interesting, because he told me you moved to Seattle and he hadn't seen you in 2 years. Kieran arrived 10 minutes later, looking like a man walking to his execution. The three of us sat in Delilah's small living room like the world's most uncomfortable therapy session. How long? Delilah asked him, tears streaming down her face. How long what? He said weakly. How long have you been with both of us? When he didn't answer, I did. 14 months, since you were 8 weeks pregnant. Delilah's hand flew to her mouth. You were engaged to her while telling me we were getting back together? It's complicated, Kieran started. No, she interrupted. It's really not. You lied to both of us. I pulled out copies of the bank statements. He's been paying you child support while planning our wedding. $5,000 a month from a secret account. Child support? Delilah looked confused. Kieran, you told me that money was from your moonlighting job. You've been taking money from him without knowing it was child support? I asked. I thought he was just helping because he cared about me, she whispered. The three of us sat in silence, absorbing the full scope of Kieran's deception. He hadn't just betrayed me, he'd manipulated both of us. There's something else you should know, I told Delilah gently. Kieran's mother has been involved in this. I explained about Vivian's investigation, her knowledge of the affair, her financial support of Delilah's rent. By the time I finished, Delilah was sobbing. She's been paying my rent? She gasped. I thought Kieran was covering it. You've been a pawn, I said. We both have. Kieran finally found his voice. Mom was trying to help. Your mother orchestrated this entire situation, I snapped. She wanted me destroyed and she used your baby to do it. That's not true. She's been encouraging your relationship with Delilah for months. She wanted you to cheat so she could expose it after our wedding for maximum humiliation. Delilah stood up shakily. I need you both to leave. Delilah, please. Kieran reached for her. Don't touch me, she said coldly. I need to think. Outside her apartment, Kieran turned to me desperately. We can still fix this. Fix what? You have a baby coming with another woman. Our marriage is over. I choose you, he said. I'll sign away parental rights. I'll never see her again. I stared at him in disgust. You'd abandon your own child? If it means saving our marriage, there is no marriage to save, I said. You killed it the day you decided to lie to me, please. I love you. No, you don't. You love the idea of me, the perfect wife who'd never question you, never challenge you, never expect honesty. I'm not that woman. I got in my car and drove away, leaving him standing in the parking lot. The next phase of my plan required patience. I waited 3 days before calling Delilah. How are you feeling? I asked. Awful, she admitted. I can't stop thinking about how stupid I've been. You weren't stupid. You were lied to. I should have known something was wrong when his mother started being so involved. About that, I said carefully. I have some information you might find interesting about Vivian's motivations. I met Delilah at a quiet cafe and showed her everything Raymond had discovered. Vivian's gambling addiction, her debts to loan sharks, her deliberate manipulation of the situation. She's been using my pregnancy to hurt you? Delilah asked, horrified. And she's been using you to hurt me. She doesn't care about your baby, Delilah. She cares about controlling the narrative. What do? We give her what she deserves. Over the next hour, I outlined my plan. It was elaborate, required perfect timing, and would only work if we could trust each other completely. Why would you help me? Delilah asked. I slept with your husband, because we're both victims here, I said, and because your baby deserves better than this toxic family dynamic. She thought for a long moment. What do you need me to do? First, stop taking any money from Kieran or Vivian. We're going to cut off their financial control. I I can't afford my rent without help. That's where I come in. I slid a check across the table. Consider it an investment in justice. Phase 1 began immediately. Delilah called Kieran and told him she needed space to think. No visits, no phone calls, no financial support. She was going to handle things on her own. Kieran panicked as expected. Within hours, he was calling me, begging me to intervene. She won't take my calls, he said. The baby is mine. I have rights. Maybe you should have thought about that before lying to both of us, I replied. This is your fault. She was fine until you poisoned her against me. I told her the truth. If that poisoned her against you, what does that say about your behavior? He hung up on me. Phase 2 involved Vivian directly. I called her the next day. I heard Delilah is refusing Kieran's support, I said. That must be concerning for you. I don't know what you mean. Come on, Vivian. We both know you've been orchestrating this whole situation. What happens to your plan if Delilah disappears with your grandchild? My plan? The one where you destroy my relationship with Kieran by exposing his affair after our wedding. The one where you've been paying Delilah's rent and encouraging their relationship. The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. What do you want? She finally asked. I want to make a deal. We met at an upscale restaurant downtown, the kind of place where Vivian felt comfortable displaying her wealth and superiority. She arrived wearing designer clothes and enough jewelry to fund a small country, but I could see the stress in her eyes. You look tired, I observed as she sat down. It's been a difficult week. I imagine owing loan sharks $350,000 would be stressful. She froze, her water glass halfway to her lips. I don't know what you're talking about. Your gambling debts, Vivian. The online poker, the sports betting. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? You have no proof. I pulled out copies of her bank statements and betting records. I have everything, including records of the threats you've been receiving. Her composure cracked. What do you want? I want you to leave Delilah alone. Stop paying her rent. Stop manipulating the situation. Stop trying to control your son's life. And if I don't, I'll tell Kieran's father about your gambling addiction and your debts. I'll tell him how you've been using family money to pay loan sharks. I'll tell him about your role in orchestrating Kieran's affair. He'll never believe you. Want to bet? Because based on your track record, gambling doesn't seem to be your strong suit. Vivian's face contorted with rage. You little bitch. You think you can threaten me? I'm not threatening you. I'm offering you a choice. Walk away from the situation and deal with your debts privately, or have everything exposed publicly. I'll destroy you. You already tried. It didn't work. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Actually, I do. You're capable of sacrificing your own son's happiness to feed your need for control. You're capable of manipulating a pregnant woman to serve your agenda. You're capable of risking your family's financial security to feed your addiction. I stood up, leaving money for my untouched drink on the table. But here's what you're not capable of, Vivian. You're not capable of admitting when you've lost. Phase 3 was the most delicate. It required Delilah to be absolutely convincing, because Kieran would be watching for any sign of deception. Delilah called him a week later, sobbing. I made a mistake, she said through tears. I shouldn't have pushed you away. I need you. Kieran rushed to her apartment, finding her doubled over in apparent pain. The baby, she gasped. Something's wrong. He drove her to the emergency room, where a sympathetic doctor, who happened to be a friend of mine from nursing school, confirmed that the baby was fine, but Delilah was suffering from severe stress. The emotional trauma of recent events has put significant strain on both mother and child, the doctor told Kieran. She needs stability and support. Whatever she needs, Kieran said immediately. She needs to get away from whatever situation is causing this stress. I'm recommending complete bed rest in a calm environment. That's how Delilah ended up in a private rental house an hour outside the city, paid for by my settlement money from the annulment. Kieran visited every day, bringing flowers and promises that everything would work out. What he didn't know was that I was staying in the guest bedroom. Every morning after Kieran left for his hospital shift, Delilah and I would review our next moves. We'd become unlikely allies, bonded by our shared experience of his deception. I can't believe I'm helping you destroy my baby's father, Delilah said one morning, rubbing her belly. We're not destroying him, we're holding him accountable. What's the difference? Destruction is what Vivian tried to do to me. Accountability is what he should have faced a long time ago. 2 weeks into our arrangement, Kieran proposed to Delilah. He arrived with roses and a ring, dropping to one knee in the rental house's living room, while I watched through the security camera I'd had installed. I want to do this right, he told her. I want to marry you before the baby comes. What about your wife? Delilah asked. The annulment will be final next week. We can be a real family. Delilah looked at the ring, the same ring he'd originally planned to give me before upgrading for our engagement. I need time to think, she said. That night, she called me into the living room. He's using the same ring. I know. The same words, too, probably. The same promises. Probably. She was quiet for a long moment. How do you do it? How do you trust anyone after this? I don't know yet, I admitted, but I know I'll never settle for less than honesty again. Even if honesty is painful, especially then. The next phase required perfect timing. I'd been tracking Vivian's movements through Raymond's surveillance, waiting for the right moment to strike. It came 3 days later. Vivian's loan sharks had given her an ultimatum: pay up within 48 hours or face consequences. Desperate, she'd been trying to liquidate assets without her husband's knowledge. She'd already sold her jewelry collection and cashed out a retirement account. I called her that morning. Having trouble raising funds? I asked. Go to hell. I have a proposition for you. I'm not interested. $400,000, cash. Enough to pay your debts and start fresh. The silence stretched between us. What do you want? A public confession? About what? Everything. Your role in orchestrating Kieran's affair, your manipulation of Delilah, your gambling addiction, all of it. You're insane. You have 36 hours before your loan sharks start collecting. Do you really think you have better options? I hung up and waited. 24 hours later, she called back. If I do this, I want guarantees. The money up front. Assurance that my family won't be harmed financially. Done, but it has to be public. I want witnesses. Fine, but I choose when and where, as long as it's within the next 12 hours. She chose the same restaurant where we'd had our previous confrontation. This time, I arrived with Raymond, a notary, and a written confession for her to sign. Vivian looked like she'd aged 10 years since our last meeting. Her perfectly styled hair was slightly disheveled, her makeup couldn't quite hide the dark circles under her eyes, and her hands shook as she reached for the document. Read it out loud first, I said. I want to make sure you understand what you're admitting to. Her voice was barely above a whisper as she began. I, Vivian Ashford, manipulated my son's relationship with his fiancée by encouraging and financially supporting his affair with another woman. I deliberately withheld knowledge of this affair until after their wedding to cause maximum emotional damage to both parties. I used a pregnant woman as a pawn in my scheme to destroy a marriage I disapproved of. I have been hiding a gambling addiction that has cost my family hundreds of thousands of dollars and put us in debt to dangerous creditors. She looked up at me with hatred in her eyes. Satisfied? Sign it. She signed. The notary witnessed, and I transferred the money to her account electronically. This doesn't mean I forgive you, she said as she gathered her things. I don't care if you forgive me, I replied. I care that you can never do this to anyone else. The confession was insurance, but I had bigger plans for it. The final phase began the next morning. I called a meeting with Kieran, Delilah, and both sets of parents at the rental house. Only Kieran and his father showed up. Vivian was conspicuously absent. Where's Mom? Kieran asked as we gathered in the living room. She won't be joining us, his father said grimly. We had quite a conversation last night. I placed copies of Vivian's confession on the coffee table. Kieran's father picked up one copy and read it silently, his face growing darker with each line. You knew about this? He asked his son. Not all of it, Kieran said defensively. I had no idea Mom was paying Delilah's rent or encouraging the affair. But you knew about the affair itself. You knew about the baby. Yes. And you married someone else anyway. Kieran looked around the room desperately, as if searching for an ally. I was confused. I didn't know what to do. You knew exactly what to do, Delilah said quietly. You chose to lie instead. I was trying to protect everyone. You were trying to protect yourself, I corrected. And you were willing to let your mother destroy innocent people to do it. Kieran's father stood up abruptly. I need some air. After he left, the three of us sat in uncomfortable silence. Finally, Kieran spoke. What happens now? Now you face the consequences of your choices, I said. Our annulment is final. You have a child coming with Delilah. Your mother has confessed to manipulating this entire situation. And us? He asked Delilah. She touched her belly thoughtfully. I don't know. I need time to figure out who you really are underneath all the lies. I'm the same person you fell in love with. No, she said sadly. That person was a character you were playing. I need to meet the real you before I can decide anything. 3 months later, I was sitting in a different cafe, reading wedding announcements in the newspaper, when Delilah called. Did you see the news about Vivian? She asked. What news? Kieran's father filed for divorce. He's also pressing charges for identity theft. Apparently she'd been using his credit cards for her gambling without his knowledge. Where is she now? Rehab. Court-ordered gambling addiction treatment. She'll be there for at least 6 months. And Kieran? Still trying to convince me to marry him. He brings the ring every time he visits. How are you feeling about that? Like I'm finally seeing him clearly. He's not a bad person, but he's weak. He makes decisions based on what's easiest, not what's right. That's a hard thing to realize about someone you love. The hardest part is knowing that our baby will be raised by someone who chooses convenience over honesty. Maybe he'll learn. Maybe. But I'm not willing to bet my life on it anymore. 6 months after that conversation, I received an unexpected call from Kieran's father. I wanted to thank you, he said without preamble. For what? For exposing the truth. I know it couldn't have been easy. It wasn't. Vivian is out of rehab now. She's staying in a supervised living facility, working on rebuilding her relationship with reality. The gambling addiction was worse than any of us knew. How is Kieran handling everything? Better than I expected. He's finally taking responsibility for his actions. He's in therapy, he's been honest with Delilah about everything, and he's working on being a good father. And Delilah? She's remarkable. She moved back to the city, found her own apartment, started a support group for women who've been manipulated in relationships. The baby is beautiful, by the way. I'm glad they're both doing well. There's something else. Kieran wanted me to tell you he's sorry. Really sorry. He knows he can't undo what he did, but he wants you to know he understands the damage he caused. I appreciate that. Do you ever think about forgiving him? I considered the question. I'm not carrying anger anymore, if that's what you're asking. But forgiveness and trust are different things. I forgave him for my own peace of mind, but I'll never trust him again. That's fair. How are you doing with everything? He was quiet for a moment. It's strange, starting over at 62, but I'm learning things about myself I never knew, like how much I'd been enabling Vivian's behavior without realizing it. Are you happy? I'm working on it. Some days are better than others. A year after the whole mess began, I ran into Delilah at a bookstore. She was pushing a stroller with a beautiful baby girl inside, her face bright with the kind of happiness that comes from hard-won self-respect. She's gorgeous, I said, peering at the baby. Thank you. She's been the light of my life. How are things with Kieran? He's a good father, she said diplomatically. We're not together, but we co-parent well. He's learned to respect boundaries. And you? Are you seeing anyone? She smiled. Actually, yes. Someone I met in my support group. He's honest to a fault, sometimes brutally so. It's refreshing. I'm happy for you. What about you? Dating again? Taking it slow. I'm learning to trust my instincts again. Any regrets about how everything played out? I thought about it. No, it was painful, but it taught me something important about myself. What's that? That I'd rather be alone than accept less than I deserve. As I walked home that day, I reflected on everything that had happened. Vivian's manipulation had been cruel and calculated, but it had ultimately revealed truths that needed exposing. Kieran's betrayal had been devastating, but it had freed me from a marriage built on lies. Delilah's pain had been real, but it had led her to find her own strength. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you ends up being the best thing that could have happened. 6 months later, I received a wedding invitation in the mail. Not from Kieran, from Delilah. She was marrying the man from her support group, a carpenter named Forrest who'd lost his first wife to cancer and understood the value of honesty in relationships. I attended the wedding, sitting in the back row and watching as Delilah promised to love and honor someone who deserved it. Kieran was there too, holding his daughter and looking genuinely happy for his ex. During the reception, I found myself standing next to him at the bar. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For not letting me get away with it. For holding me accountable. I'm a better person because of what you did." "You're a better person because you chose to become one," I corrected. "I just refuse to enable you." "Same thing, maybe." "No, there's an important difference. I can't change people. I can only choose not to accept behavior that hurts me." He nodded thoughtfully. "I hope you find someone who deserves you. I hope you continue deserving your daughter." As the evening wound down, I said goodbye to Delilah and headed home. My apartment was quiet, peaceful, filled with my own choices and my own truth. For the first time in years, I felt completely content with my own company. 2 years later, I did meet someone, a fellow nurse named Phoenix, who'd also survived a manipulative relationship and understood the importance of transparency. Our first date lasted 7 hours because we spent most of it comparing notes on red flags and discussing our non-negotiable boundaries. When he proposed 18 months later, he did it in my living room on a Tuesday morning before work. No fanfare or grand gestures. Just honest words and a simple question. "Will you build something real with me?" I said yes because I knew exactly who I was saying yes to. Our wedding was small, intimate, attended only by people who genuinely supported our happiness. As I walked down the aisle, I spotted Delilah in the third row, holding her daughter and beaming at me. Her presence felt like a blessing from someone who understood the journey it had taken to get there. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to our union, I held my breath for a split second. Old habits from old trauma. But the silence that followed was golden, pure, untainted by manipulation or hidden agendas. As Phoenix and I exchanged vows, I thought about the woman I'd been 3 years earlier, standing at a different altar with a different man, believing I was making a promise that would last forever. That woman had been naive, trusting, willing to overlook red flags in favor of romantic ideals. The woman I'd become was wiser, stronger, more discerning. She knew the difference between love and control, between support and manipulation, between honest imperfection and calculated deception. When we kissed to seal our marriage, I felt something I'd never experienced at my first wedding. Complete certainty that I was making the right choice with the right person for the right reasons. The reception was everything my first wedding wasn't. Relaxed, joyful, authentic. No one wore white except me. No one gave speeches filled with hidden meanings or passive-aggressive commentary. No one slipped threatening letters under hotel room doors. During the father-daughter dance with my dad, he whispered in my ear, "I'm proud of how you handled everything." "It wasn't pretty," I replied. "The best battles rarely are. But you fought for the truth, and that matters." Later that night, as Phoenix and I settled into our hotel room, I found myself thinking about Vivian. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that she was doing well in her recovery, had made amends with most of the family, and was slowly rebuilding her relationship with her granddaughter. "Penny for your thoughts?" Phoenix asked, noticing my distant expression. "Just thinking about second chances," I said. "How some people deserve them and some people earn them. And some people create them for themselves," he added, pulling me close. "Is that what we're doing?" I think we're living proof that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can lead to the best thing that happens to you. As I drifted off to sleep in my husband's arms, I smiled thinking about how different this wedding night felt from my last one. No hidden envelopes, no devastating secrets, no cold realization that everything I believed was a lie. Just honest love, earned trust, and the quiet confidence that comes from choosing someone who chooses you back, completely and without reservation. 3 years later, when Phoenix and I welcomed our first child, Delilah sent a beautiful handmade baby blanket with a note that read, "For the baby who will grow up knowing what real love looks like." Kieran sent flowers with a card that simply said, "Congratulations. You deserve every happiness." Even Vivian sent a gift, a silver picture frame with an apology note acknowledging the pain she'd caused and expressing hope that our family would know only honesty and joy. As I looked at my sleeping daughter in her crib, surrounded by gifts from people who'd all played roles in the most painful chapter of my life, I realized something profound. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most end up teaching us the most valuable lessons about who we really are and what we're truly capable of surviving. My mother-in-law had worn white to my wedding, thinking she was marking my defeat. Instead, she'd marked the beginning of my transformation into someone who would never again accept less than she deserved. And in the end, that was the greatest gift she could have given me.